like to then move to our agenda item 14, which is our still in our public session, the IAASB certification of going concern, and I'm going to hand over to Nerea to quickly talk us through the analysis that you've done in conclusion on our public interest, on the public interest responsiveness of the standards. Thanks, Nerea.
Thank you, Chair. So we're now moving to the certification of the ISA 570 revised 2024 going concern that was approved by the IAASB in December of 2024. So the board has been provided with the staff analysis on public interest responsiveness of the standard and a draft certification in case they decide to approve. Also, the documents submitted by the IAASB include a cover note with the specifications of the approved standard, the final pronouncement of ISA 570, the basis for conclusion, the due process checklist, and the IAASB certification of public interest responsiveness. So this was a project that has been in the PIOB agenda and demands since the last revision in 2015 was approved. And some of the considerations from other stakeholders, but mostly from the PIOB, was the consultation with IASB and the financial reporting framework, as well as consideration of having explicit disclosure in the auditor report. So coming on to 2020, when the IAASB decided to start information gathering activities together with the fraud topic, the PIOB was very supportive of the initiative. And since then, the PIOB has been overseeing the development of the standard since the issuance of the discussion paper on fraud and going concern, project approval, exposure draft, the revision of and consideration of comments from respondents in their comment letters, and the final approval of the standard. So the PIOB raised a number of public interest issues from the very beginning that have been substantively addressed. There was one that we've been discussing in the previous session, and is the one related to extending differential requirements to all public interest entities. The PIOB acknowledged already in our public interest issues that this has been considered under the PIE Track 2 project, and therefore will monitor the development of that project separately. The PIOB and the staff has also considered the compliance and the responsiveness to public interest and the PIF, and has assessed whether the standard meets the qualitative characteristics in the PIF, concluding that it does. So with all these and our observation and overseeing all the meetings of the IAASB regarding this project, the staff considers that the ISA 570 revised 2024 has met due process and is responsive to public interest, and therefore recommends the PIOB to certify the standard. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Nerea, and thank you to Martin, Nerea, Pavel for the work done on all of this. Can I have a look and check with the PIOB members? Are you comfortable to support the recommendation by the staff through their paper and their work to certify that this ISA is responsive to the public interest as well as due process have been followed? Thank you very much. Thanks for that. And well done. I think we normally actually clap here. Well done. Okay, then next we've got, I know I'm standing between you and your lunch, but we have a few small things to just finalize. On the due process amendments, maybe just for the sake of the public record, a brief background. The two standard setting boards have always had a due process document. When they moved out of out of IFAC into IFIA, and with the monitoring group recommendations, obviously that document needed to be firstly move out with them. I think James, in a way, is the current patron of the document. I wanted to say father, but maybe that's not the right parent. And similarly, an update to align the due process document with what is the more updated version of the current practice when it comes to due process. I'm going to hand over to Martin. There's been a lot of deliberations and we've also had some discussions on that, but maybe Martin, just a summary from your side on where we are and how do we take this forward.
Well, thank you, Chair, and you've set the context very clearly, so thank you for that. And we are here today after a process of a number of months, a very fruitful dialogue with James and his team, and we've come back to our board on at least 2 occasions to provide progress updates and look at the documentation in detail. And as a result of that, I think we can say we are comfortable to accept the due process document as a fair reflection of the process at the current time, and we're comfortable that that is made publicly available for all interested stakeholders to see that. We do so in the knowledge that further work on the due process will be pursued in a number of areas, including in relation to ascertaining, looking further at effects analysis, implications of the standards, and also with regard to the benefits of a benchmarking exercise. So those things we do regard as being important to be undertaken, recognizing the other workloads of the system, but to be undertaken in a period of around 12 months, let's say, in that reasonable time frame, and that may also usefully include a public consultation element to draw in comments from the broader stakeholder community. So in summary, just for the sake of clarity, we do accept this as a good reference document and helpful for all at this stage, and we do expect that there will be further work along the lines that I've just described.
Thank you for that, Martin. And maybe James, Tom, Gabriella, for your benefit, when we prepared for this and worked through this, and we've had lots of deliberations, as you know, we have said to one another that this is the document that describes broadly how the process and due process works at the moment. It's also the document to which you refer when you do your due process sign-off on every project as you approve them and send it to the PIOB for certification. Having said that, the world of due process probably has shifted quite a bit. Different standard setters deal with due process differently, and some of them have really thick books and details, and others not, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. We have recognized, as we debated it, that we are in the middle of a transitional phase. You've moved from before the monitoring group recommendations, where it was really a task force driven model with a strong involvement from technical directors, to you halfway into a staff-led model. And that probably means that it's going to take another couple of years before that process is embedded. It means very different levels of debate at the board meeting. It probably also means, and it was in some of your papers as well, very different levels of how do you package stakeholder engagement to find its way formally onto board meeting agendas, for example, because not all stakeholders comment via comment letters. The role of the PIOB has changed in this process and will also evolve in the next couple of years as the monitoring group recommendations, implementations mature. It's probably the right word. So all of those things means we're probably in the middle of a process that needs a little bit more time. The other very important 2 aspects of due process will be, in time, how do we stack up against other global benchmarks? And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to be exactly the same, but that exercise probably needs, after conclusion of our transitional phase, needs some thinking. and very importantly, due process documents ultimately need some public consultation. So we're very comfortable as a board where we are for now, and we recognize and accept that that is the appropriate place, but also saying, let's also just make sure and make it clear to people that read it and people that ask the question that it is the intention to do an updated version as we go through this process. And the timeline is probably to have it concluded towards the end of next year or so. So basically, a conclusion of, I hope that's a fair reflection of the discussion that we had. Okay, can I just get first a nod before I go to James? I'm going to go to you just now, a nod from my board members that you're comfortable that that's where we are. And obviously, once we've gone through that final conclusion process in 18 months or so from now, we'll revisit it again for approval. Thank you, James. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure to work very closely with Martin and team through them to get your inputs and viewpoints as we develop that document. Maybe I'd just like to emphasize, I think, at least relative to due process, I'd like to say that it's been a good opportunity with the reforms to modernize that, to reflect all of those thinking, and that's a number one element of moving our due process forward, aligned with the monitoring group reforms. I'm very comfortable that I think that due process provides the two standard setting boards with a very solid foundation and rigor that's expected within our communities and the adopters that use our standards. I'd also like to be very comfortable that our due process, although it may not look and feel like another standard says, we have benchmarked that on the outset. We will continue to do so. And I think some of the enhancements that we already have within there are really quite fit for purpose for our principles-based standard setting. I do support an ongoing monitoring and look at this, so I'm glad that the documents can be used as a basis for our reference for our work as we move forward. The biggest change that we're actually instituting, it's not on due process, but it's how we're applying the public interest framework. And that is the area that our boards are experiencing, the boards themselves and staff. And so I do support, as we gain experience, we should reflect how our experience is playing out in the application of the public interest framework for certifications as well as due process. So in that light, I'm open, sorry. I think the time frame about a year makes sense, but I'd like to allow the experience to unfold so that when we do go to consultation, we really do understand it before the best product of how we're applying the public interest framework into the board's thinking process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, James. And from a next steps point of view, there are probably two things to mention. The one is between James and Martin, they'll get together and just agree on maybe among them and with our staff a little task force to start thinking about these things, probably not kicking off immediately, but towards the latter part of the year, how to start keeping an eye on what needs to be updated. How do we make sure that we are fully aligned, not just with terms of reference of and the operating procedures of the PIOB, the operating procedures of the standard setting boards, but also how the practice unfolds over time. So I think that's action number one, and maybe the appropriate time for us to get a little bit of feedback on the progress would be at our January meeting, I would think, because I think we can allow for 6 months. That would be it will skip the October meeting, that we get some feedback on that. And the other important point is this document will clearly be put on our website, the IFIA website, or a link from our website to IFIA. I'll leave that to all of you to just work out what the appropriate way is. And it will come with I don't want to call it a health warning, but a cover note to just explain that in a way this is work in progress and give an indication of the timelines of when we will enhance it further and put it out for public consultation. Okay, so I think with that we can conclude this point. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for the work that's been done on this. The next item, we've got 2 more items that won't take us a lot of time. The next item is the minutes from our January public section meeting. There are a couple of last changes and edits that the staff need to bring to those minutes. Nothing too serious, but just a clarification on some of the certifications and so on. So we will round robin that. We've already received input from the standard setting board chairs and from James. So we will just round robin that to everybody to make sure that you're comfortable with those changes in the track change form. So that one stands over. And then lastly, Martin, we have the ratification of the appointment of the SAC member. We have had, in between our previous meeting and this meeting, we have, through a round-robin resolution, appointed an additional person to the Standing Advisory Committee of the two standard setting boards. So Martin, maybe you just want to spend a minute to talk to that, and then we can ratify it.
Thank you, Chair. Indeed, I can be very brief. Following appropriate due process within the PIOB, and that means the evaluation by the nominations committee of the application of the individual to become a member of the Stakeholder Advisory Council, the board considered and approved the recommendation at the end of March for the appointment of Jennifer Haskell from Deloitte to be a member of the Stakeholder Advisory Council for a 3-year renewable term that's starting immediately, and with a view to participating in the forthcoming SAC meeting in about a month's time. And this appointment was considered in the overall context of the diversity of experiences which are important to provide what the standard boards will benefit most from, that diversity of perspectives, etc., on the SAC. So with that appointment joining the inaugural members, we feel that we're practically at where we need to be in terms of SAC composition for the foreseeable future.
Okay, and we can consider that one ratified. Then we've got 1 or 2 documents for noting. The one is the 2025 calendar. I don't think there's anything that needs to be said about that. And then the second one is there are 1 or 2 additional virtual meetings. The standard setting boards are working very hard, and obviously Martin will engage with people just to make sure that we have the appropriate observers to dial in for those meetings. Anything else, Martin, before we wrap up before lunch? Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of this public session. Thank you very much again to the 3 of you for the work and the contribution that's gone into that. We're going to break for lunch, and we're going to reconvene at 2 o'clock for a private session. And please join us for lunch. Lunch is downstairs, as always, in the garden on the patio. Thank you.